Has Family Guy ever done anything really wrong? Okay, you can all put your hands down. That was just a rhetorical question. The show has changed a ton over its 25-year run, which is only natural for a show to do. However, some of the decisions the team has made can be argued to have had a net negative impact on the show in the long run. So let's take a look at the times Family Guy shook things up, but didn't exactly come out looking all the better on the other side. So let's go ahead and address that large elephant standing in the corner. We're of course talking about that one decision the show made years back that could have fundamentally changed everything for the better if it had gone the opposite way. You know the one I'm talking about. The one that still keeps you up at night. The one that made you think maybe there really was no saving Family Guy.
It could even be a boat! You know how much we've wanted one of those?
Then
We'll take the box.
Just think of where the show could have been now if Peter had a boat, other than the one he would get next season. I'm just messing around. Figured I'd grease you up before we get into the real nitty-gritty stuff that actually makes people mad. And one of those decisions happens to be the move to break Brian and his longtime girlfriend Jillian up. While the show's never really been keen on keeping relationships running for longer than a single episode, Brian and Jillian happen to be the exception. A smarmy dog and a mentally impaired woman, it was a match made in heaven. But their relationship was more than just a joke. It was actually a great little narrative addition that further fleshed out Brian's character. Plus, who doesn't love some Drew Barrymore? She really made that little idiot one of the highlights of season 5. Obviously, a big Hollywood name like her was probably only ever destined to be a guest star rather than a solidified main character, but we still think breaking them up ultimately was a net negative to Brian's character as a whole.
Do you work with Brian at the detective agency?
Why, yes, as a matter of fact, I do, at the detective agency.
Jillian was first introduced in season 5's Whistle While Your Wife Works as the beautiful bimbo girlfriend of Brian. Really, she was kind of his polar opposite. She's sweet, optimistic, and doesn't have a single synapse firing in that brain of hers. Brian's not a scholar either, but at least he seems capable of using his brain for thinking rather than storing hot air. It's a pairing seemingly destined to fail, as Brian prided himself on being knowledgeable of the finer things, while Jillian had no capacity for any of that. But they do say that opposites attract, if only dating were as simple as magnetism.
The DVD needs to be face up when you put it in. Uh-huh. You should be able to see the words Mr. 3000.
While Jillian was mostly just used as a way for other characters to dog on Brian and point out his hypocrisies, we could see a little bit of positivity being inflicted on him. His need to be more patient with her actually showed some level of restraint for him. You'd probably learn to have the patience of a monk if it meant getting access to a body like that. But Brian's reasoning for staying with her is probably why the show felt they needed to break them up. It was clear he only really liked Jillian for her body rather than her personality, so Brian shouldn't have been allowed to quote-unquote win her in the end. It's not like marrying her would have been a win for him either. One season is fine, but try several years with her. Brian's brain would have been sanded down to a smooth pebble.
I just really want to go dance. Oh, there it is again! What is that?
But Jillian still showed that she could have easily slotted herself into the Griffin family if she had stayed longer. In the episode where she and Brian break up, season 6's Movin' Out Brian song, she actually formed a cute little friendship with Peter. Finding someone on the same intellectual level as herself was probably as gratifying as finding someone who speaks English in a foreign country. But this would even extend to Jillian's eventual wedding in season 7's We Love You Conrad, where she asked Peter to walk her down the aisle. This was a nice little touch that could have extended to the other characters in the family at some point as well, but it doesn't look like we'll be getting any of that.
This isn't an iPod?
Your junior mints play MP3s?
My iPod is chocolate?
But Jillian quickly became a tool used to teach Brian a lesson rather than a character to be fleshed out more. It's Brian's own insecurities that end up ruining their relationship, fearing commitment too much to strike while the iron was hot and lock Jillian down. Jillian is the one to break things off, making Brian look like the dumbest guy in the room for the first time in their relationship. Not the first time in his life, obviously, but this is where it probably stung the most.
The word self-absorbed comes to mind.
And pretentious.
Definitely pretentious.
And he's got a big ego!
And this is honestly fine for teaching Brian a lesson, but does he actually learn anything from this? Not really. He pretty much just uses this moment to inflict more self-pity on himself rather than changing himself in hopes of this never happening again. That's Alcoholic 101, so we can't really say this is the most shocking outcome. And this kind of led Brian down a rather repetitive love life, never really finding someone who was anywhere near as memorable or likable as Jillian. Kinda surprised that with her husband Derek's death, Brian hasn't tried to rekindle that old flame. Maybe Jillian's smarter than we think and knows to stay away.
He showed up at my door and said he was a federal boob inspector.
And speaking of Derek's death, we can't forget one of the most pivotal deaths that came from that same episode, and that's the killing of Diane Simmons. The season 9 episode, and then the reviewer, revealed her to be a cunning killer who picked off several minor Family Guy characters before eventually being offed herself. Now don't get us wrong, she was a psycho, and we're on the Rip Bozo train with this one. But we'd be lying if there wasn't a noticeable hole left behind from Diane's absence in the show. And we aren't talking about the one in Muriel's back.
Muriel walked in and caught me in the act. It wasn't her fault, poor thing, but she had to die.
Diane was one of those characters who's been here since the beginning, appearing in Season 1's Death Has a Shadow and quickly establishing a love-hate relationship with her co-anchor Tom Tucker. People talk about having work wives or work husbands, but these guys skipped straight over that and went straight to being a work old married couple. Vocally wanting your partner to die may just be the strongest love of all.
I can do this.
That's right, Tom.
And while these two were rarely the main focus of a plot, whenever the Griffins weren't present, the newsroom was often delivering on some incredible jokes and exchanges. The back and forth between the two led to some grade A humor, and this helped to flesh out Quahog and make the town seem all the more lived in. It felt like these two had known each other for years, building up a repertoire that gives rivals who secretly want to sleep with each other, if only just to get a little closer to strangling each other's throats.
Well, Diane, that last report was so good, I think you deserve a spanking.
Oh, Tom, I don't think your wife would appreciate that.
But since Diane died, can you really say we felt any of that recently? Now, don't get us wrong. The reveal of Diane being the killer was a genuine shock, and her motive was believable and right in line with her attitude and insecurities established in other episodes. Like Tom, she loves the limelight, and being forced out of the only life she's ever known was not gonna happen. And like Tom, she's also not a great actor, so there really was no plan B for her other than murder. A real no other choice situation.
The hidden gun goes off, kills James Woods, and at the first opportunity, I retrieve the gun and plant it in Tom's bag.
But once she died, the show pretty much lost that fun dynamic between Tom and his co-host. Sure, she was swiftly replaced with another female anchor, Joyce Kinney, but what exactly is this woman brought to the table? She had her one standout episode in And I'm Joyce Kinney, but since then, the show has done next to nothing in terms of fleshing out her character or even building up her relationship with Tom. The corpse of Diane Simmons would probably have more of an on-screen presence than this woman.
I'd like to welcome our new co-anchor, Joyce Kinney. Welcome, Joyce.
Thanks, Tom.
Wow, you sound crazy nervous.
While Diane's death may not be directly tied to this, the world of Family Guy has noticeably felt smaller and smaller over the years, with side characters doing less and less to really make the town of Quahog feel expansive. Tom has pretty much been saddled with all the broadcast television related jokes, while Joyce kinda just sits there like a deer in headlights. I don't want coworkers who respect one another, I want coworkers who hate each other. So while we think the reveal and exit of Diane were all carried out fairly well, it's clear the show had no real idea of how to follow up on Tom Tucker and his coworkers' dynamic. And thus, Channel 5 became less memorable, Tom Tucker lost his best scene partner, and now all I have hope for is Ollie Williams to get his big break. Put my man behind the news desk. He's ready to give you all the news in the most concise way possible.
What happened last time, Ollie?
Stewie killed Lois.
Then what?
Peter got blamed.
Then what?
Peter went to court.
Then what?
Lois came back.
Ow.
Wasn't really dead.
Thanks, Ollie.
And this isn't the only loss of a character that created a noticeable hole in the world of Family Guy. The same thing happened with Peter's boss Angela, who was written out of the show after her voice actor Carrie Fisher passed away in real life. Yeah, a bit of a different situation than killing off a character for funsies. Obviously, this wasn't something the show had really anticipated very much. I'm sure the idea was to run with Angela for as long as they could, with no real contingency plan. We get it. Nobody wants to be thinking about what to do when their coworkers die, but as we've seen with the string of new bosses Peter has had, maybe they should have.
She may be gone, but her voice will live on in DVD and Hulu Plus and tiny droid projected messages.
So after Angela was written off, Peter got two new bosses in Bert and Sheila, a mixed-race couple whose biggest personality quirk was that they were a mixed-race couple. Yeah, even the talents of Bryan Cranston and Niecy Nash weren't saving this one. The show pretty quickly established that there was nothing to their characters, and worse, there was no real dynamic to be had between them and Peter. Peter's tomfoolery never really affected Bert and Sheila in a memorable way, leading to very few moments involving the two that are really worth talking about. Except for the time they gave Peter gender reassignment surgery while he was knocked out. Classic prank.
We fulfilled your letter of medical intent for your reassignment surgery.
But the show must have realized they weren't really working out because the couple was quietly removed from the series and replaced with the no-nonsense Preston Lloyd. Essentially what you would get if you gave a piece of wood sentience. Preston at least serves as some kind of antithesis to Peter, having little time for buffoonery and not a spark of life behind those eyes. It would make sense that this would be the direction you'd want to go with the boss for Peter, but Preston, as well as Bert and Sheila, fall into the same problems. They just aren't characters.
Beer is supposed to be fun.
I've been sober for 46 years.
How old are you?
46.
Angela had way more to her than just being Peter's boss. She was her own person with a life outside of work. Not a very good one, but hey, I'll take that over a handful of characters I believe shut down inside the brewery at the end of the day like they're Chuck E. Cheese animatronics. Angela was introduced to be a lot like Preston, a serious stick in the mud who begrudgingly put up with Peter's antics, but over time, she was shown to be a lot more than that. She's insecure, self-hating, and desperately seeks human connection. Oh god, I am not enjoying looking into this mirror.
Shut up, everyone! Everybody shut up! This took a lot of courage!
But the thing is, she had her tics. There was more to her than just being Peter's boss. She was an actual fleshed out character who tried to be more than just one thing. Bert and Sheila were just a caricature of progressive coupling. Preston's an avatar for all work and no play. And we can't even say these characters were Flanderized. They came with that factory setting the moment they entered the show.
Attention, everyone. Do not adjust your TV sets. We are an interracial couple.
And none of them have had anywhere near as important a relationship with Peter as Angela did. Angela provided hilarious reactions to the multiple missteps Peter would cause. And she would sometimes even flip the script to make Peter the one concerned about their working relationship. She brought so much to the show in this minor role that these replacements just haven't been able to capture. Sure, Bert and Sheila only got about 5 episodes of appearances, and Preston's only been around for a few seasons, but the difference in energy at that brewery is painfully obvious. I would have preferred Opie to finally get that promotion he always deserved and be upgraded to manager. You couldn't say that he didn't know the product, at least.
And I'm actually thinking about resuming my actuarial practice.
Oh my God, he's just been drunk this whole time?
And another real-world death Family Guy eventually had to reckon with is the death of actor Adam West. The iconic Batman actor had portrayed Quahog's eccentric and possibly insane Mayor West since the very early days, but when the actor passed, the show was forced to find a replacement. But how could you find someone who matches the charm and mental instability Adam West brought to the table? Short answer, you can't.
It's my parents. The party's off, everybody. Get the out of here.
So after a good while of teasing and contemplating who could be coming in and taking the mayoral reins, the show eventually landed on Mayor's cousin, Wild West. You know, the show had been dying to get actor Sam Elliott's leathery voice on for a regular occasion, and this was their moment. Wild West was a much different character than his cousin. He's calmer, more rough and tumble, and I don't think he's killed as many people. He definitely has, but probably in the form of duels or something. When are we bringing those back? I'd never be able to win one as I have the eyesight of a dehydrated newborn, but I still think it could probably solve some of our problems.
Peter, have you ever killed a man?
Reddit says I've killed 39, but that seems low.
In truth, the concept of Mayor Wild West isn't a terrible one. Obviously, we never wanted someone to replace Adam West, and we sure as heck didn't want anyone to try to do an impression of him to keep him going. This was years off the trend of using AI to resurrect dead actors, and we're glad the Family Guy team didn't decide to delve into that black magic. That being said, the characterization of Wild West just doesn't seem to mesh super well with Family Guy's current vibe.
That's a fair point, Lois. Do you mind if I make you a sweater while I respond?
Sam Elliott is a great actor, but you pretty much know what you're gonna get given Elliott's style of acting. Slow, nonchalant, and deadpan. Good for whenever you're cow poking or whatever it is they do in those Yellowstone shows, but for a show like Family Guy, we don't think it works as well. The voice and style of Family Guy's comedies seem to have slowed down a bit over the years, not being as whip-crack and fast-paced as some of the earlier seasons. When the energy was a lot faster, the juxtaposition of this kind of character might have worked better, but now? Our ADHD-riddled minds are just being lulled to sleep by the man's comforting, intoxicating voice.
You know Tom Selleck?
Oh, I used to. Many moons ago.
How many?
Many.
Look at a character we've already discussed, Peter's boss Preston. He's another character who is a very dry, very matter-of-fact, and very low energy. These kinds of characters have become less of a juxtaposition ever since the energy of the show became slower and more drawn out. That being said, we'd much rather have someone like Wild West saddling into a recurring role than someone like Preston. That mustache admittedly does a lot of the heavy lifting.
My hair follicles run deeper than the roots of a sequoia. Get him, fella.
And that's kind of what sours the character for us. He's used a bit too frequently. He isn't exactly a main character, but sometimes his presence can be a tad too overbearing. Hey, we get it, Sam Elliott can't be cheap and you want to get your money's worth as much as you can. But while Adam West's brief appearances were filled with nonsense and zany antics, Wild West is usually just acting like the straight man for a show that really doesn't need one. The slow drawl is neat and all, but the show more often than not comes to a grinding halt whenever the focus switches to him. Less is more, and right now, they need to use even less of less.
It's me, Borat. You know, from that picture Borat. You ever seen it?
You can see this not only in his brief appearances, but also in the episodes where he plays a large role in the plot. The season 22 episode, A Stash from the Past, has a lot of issues, and one of them is that West just doesn't work as well as a leading man. Sam Elliott is a leading man, but Hollywood knows just how to use him. You need someone to wrangle some cattle, he's your guy. But in a show like Family Guy, it just doesn't work with the way he's being used. His best appearance is probably his first one, the episode Wild Wild West, where he almost maintains a mythical aura to him that's used in a fairly comical way. The man can levitate after all.
Can you show me?
No, that is true.
That seems like the kind of thing you have to prove right when you say it.
Since his appearance in season 19, the character has been used a lot, and we kind of think it's been a bit of a detriment to the overall perception of the character. If the character can be used a little more sparingly and in more of a ridiculous Greek god kind of way like in his first appearance, maybe his reputation can be salvaged. But as it stands right now, we kind of wish we would have gotten a different West. Just, maybe not Kanye.
I'm giving this lasagna a massage.
But if we circle back to the topic of Peter's bosses, it always kind of shocked us how little of an impact Peter's first boss, Mr. Weed, made on the show's earlier seasons. He was Peter's boss at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory and lasted from season 1 to season 3, and yet he remained one of the most underdeveloped and underutilized characters on the roster.
Peter is an adequate assembly line worker, but you'll be happy to know our company does not pay him.
From his first appearance in Death Has a Shadow to his last appearance in Mr. Saturday Night, Mr. Weed had a total of 8 appearances. And in those 8 appearances, he did not a lot. I guess he has the privilege of being Family Guy's first gay character, even if it seemed like he wasn't totally out yet. Still, the signs were there for you eagle-eyed viewers. Or worm-eyed viewers. Basically, anyone with eyes probably could have seen it.
Good morning, camera time.
Turn that off, I don't have my face on yet, I'm ugly.
And Weed didn't really get many opportunities to leave an impact on the show, mostly just being relegated to firing Peter multiple times and ogling over the nearest handsome man. He never really got an episode that revolved around him, or one where he played a pivotal role in the story. Heck, even Preston has had more prominent appearances than Mr. Weed. The most memorable thing Mr. Weed ever did was choking to death on a dinner roll. Must suck to have your death end up being more valuable than your life.
Oh my God, Lois, stall him!
Peter, what are you doing?
Just stall him, Lois!
But in hindsight, killing him off was probably ultimately for the best. It didn't really seem like the show had much of an idea of what to do with him from the jump, and honestly, having someone like Angela as Peter's boss works much better. With that being said, they probably could have done more with his character, maybe given him a little something to do in a side story. But let's be real, this was the first 3 seasons of Family Guy. The show was still trying to figure out its main character, so it's no surprise they didn't put a lot of work into this guy. Still, all we're left with is a relatively flat character that had the potential to be much more. We might need an Afterlife episode to give a little redemption for all these dead characters.
What do all these people have in common? And how do they know I like being slowly beckoned?
But our next issue with a character doesn't come from one being replaced. Rather, it's a complete fumbling of a character's arc in one episode that has continued to leave a bad taste in fans' mouths years later. We're of course talking about the walking back of Meg's personal victory in the season 10 episode Seahorse Seashell Party, where she finally called out her family for all the BS they've done to her, only to take it all back.
Will you stop that? That is so annoying!
Oh, that was annoying? What about your stupid, obnoxious humming?
This is just proof that you don't have to kill off a character to make fans mad. Sometimes you can just give them what they've been wanting and rip it away from them for no good reason. We talked about this episode a lot, so to keep it brief, the episode revolves around Meg standing up to her family for all the mistreatment they've done to her, only for her to come to the conclusion that this is the role she's meant to play, the punching bag that keeps the family together. I'd be cutting gas lines and lighting matches if this were supposed to be my destiny. Just saying.
Do you think it's possible that this family can't survive without some sort of lightning rod to absorb all the dysfunction?
The episode contained one of the series' strongest dramatic moments, and for a second, it actually felt like a turning point for the character. It was hard not to think this was something actually important happening in the canon of the show. There were some jokes in this episode, but the writers didn't hold back on the moments of uncomfortable family drama either. It was the crux of the episode, and to have it all mean nothing felt like a big rug pull. Imagine if at the end of Brian and Stewie they both decided that they just hate each other. I'd respect them for their boldness, but they probably wouldn't be surprised when they got drowned to death with hate mail.
You'll have to clean my ass.
Oh God, Stewie, there's gotta be a line.
I guess we're the fools for thinking the show was ever really going to challenge the status quo. Here's the thing though, the status quo has changed. Think about Meg's role in the show now compared to what it was back then. Sure, she's not exactly the star child of the family, but her abuse is way less frequent and way less horrendous. Believe it or not, Meg is actually allowed to be happy nowadays. That was a big no-no in the show's original Bible, no doubt. She's super talented and is always finding new skills for her to master, and most of her misfortune now comes from her own decisions, rather than the decisions of other characters. It's kind of like the punching bag grew arms and started punching itself.
Come take my money.
My hand is bleeding and I need to wash it so it doesn't get infected.
And this episode could have been a great character moment that ushered in this new era of Meg. It would have made the rest of the family seem somewhat likable, having them own up to their own failings rather than just being reaffirmed because Meg didn't want to hurt their feelings. Any and all catharsis that came from Meg's blowup was essentially erased, ultimately leaving her as more of a pitiful character than she was before for quite a long time. Meg's been lucky enough to find her own victories later down the line, but this could have been one of the show's best dramatic episodes if they had just thrown her a bone a little early on. And let her curb stomp Peter again. That probably wouldn't fix things, but can you really argue and say it wouldn't be deserved?
My house now.
And we've got to talk about some of these cutaways, man. These things were the bread and butter of Family Guy's comedic stylings for a long time. Now, they didn't invent the cutaway gag, but they sure as hell might have invented the overuse of the gag. What was once a charming tool for nonsense comedy quickly came to be regarded as a comedic crutch, one that felt like the show was skirting by writing an actual joke in place of a pop culture reference.
That was just awful, Chris.
Terrible.
He is not ready for flashbacks.
No, he is not.
And the thing about this is that cutaways have been tracked and monitored to a science. The greatest scientific Family Guy minds got together with their beakers and rulers to measure the use of cutaway gags across the seasons to see just how often they were used. Older seasons of Family Guy often had between 5 and 10 cutaways per episode, with most of them being one-liner gags or brief intermissions that had nothing to do with the plot. The presence of a somewhat bell curve makes us think they've learned their lesson and are actively trying to improve, but we fans are still going to moan about it anyway.
Well, it sounds to me like you're a regular Benedict Arnold Drummond.
What's he expecting us to cut to?
Now don't get us wrong, cutaways are a part of the reason why Family Guy is so iconic. Never before has a show unlocked the power to inject a random joke you had in the shower one day into an episode with little to no connection to the actual story. That's the power of the phrase, remember the time? Some of the show's greatest bits have come from cutaways, and some are actually quite clever.
That's the only part that can be injured. How about you, Testicles?
It's the same. It's similar.
And then some are so out of left field that you have no choice but to laugh at the nonsense.
Why wouldn't you look at me during?
But there was a particular turning point where Family Guy decided that they were going to start making these cutaways longer. Way longer. Like we have no idea what else to put in this episode and need the pad for time kind of long. These bits became less about the joke and more about how the absence of a joke was the real joke. It's the meta 4D chess of comedy, but whether or not it actually works will probably vary based on who you ask.
Oh, by the way, Conway Twitty says cut it out. Just write a joke.
We think it kind of started with the chicken fights, which by all accounts are pretty awesome. Sure, they hardly ever actually connected to the main story, but they were at least a lot of fun. It takes actual effort to pull one of these fights off, forcing the animators to work overtime on creating wanton destruction across the entire city. You'll never hear me complaining about a giant chicken getting in the way of a story. Keep on pumping those guys full of steroids so we can have chicken fights until the end of time.
I once tried to clone a chicken. The result wound up being a man-sized chicken that was incredibly hostile and ended up escaping from the lab.
But then the show started to get a bit lazier with these longer intermissions. Eventually, they just started getting into the habit of playing whole music videos to take up time. It started out, funnily enough, with the Conway Twitty bits. Who even is this guy, and why am I watching a clip of him playing on a late-night show in the middle of this cartoon? Younger me couldn't fathom it, but the absurdity of this dead country star being thrown at us out of nowhere was kind of funny.
Yikes, I could use a distraction right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Conway Twitty.
Oh, but it didn't stop there. On more than one occasion, the show just decided to throw entire music videos into episodes with even less of a reason. The reason usually just ended up amounting to, isn't this video bad? Maybe, but you know what's worse? Being force-fed it without the show even attempting to work it into the show or making any meaningful commentary or additions to it. They do this in Season 9's Foreign Affairs with a 3-minute Dancing in the Street music video, and again with a 3-minute Hudson Brothers video in Season 19's And Then There's Fraud. And the joke is just that they're very long.
We'll be right back.
But just showing us a video in its entirety just comes off as lazy or scraping the bottom of the barrel. Think about the other times the show has used music videos, like Aha's Take On Me or Paula Abdul's Opposites Attract. The show actually put some effort into showing the videos while still putting its own spin on them. Now that's how you get people to check out some music rather than making them want to block the entire artist's discography on Spotify.
Chris, where have you been?
I don't know.
Now, in the show's defense, it does look like their reliance on cutaways is trending downwards, which means more focus on actual jokes. Now, are those jokes good? That's up to you to decide. But it does seem like they've realized cutaways are best used sparingly and with actual intention to highlight a scenario or joke rather than to just fill dead air.
Now, where are the gays?
Over here.
No, the really cartoony gays.
Yoo-hoo!
There you are. We're gonna need you guys all week.
And perhaps one of those decisions that everyone and their mother hated at the time and may still hate now was the show's decision to kill off Brian back in Season 12. We've covered that saga before, but just to briefly cover it, Brian was killed off in Season 12's Life of Brian, a move the team had alluded to at a Comic-Con a year prior, hinting a member of the family would be actually killed off. If these betting apps are around back then, I can imagine a ton of people losing a fortune when they found out it wasn't Meg.
Yes, Chris. I'm afraid that our Brian is dead.
To the show's credit, it was a shocking moment that actually had people pretty emotional. It was kind of like when Superman died. It was a pretty big deal. Probably on a slightly smaller scale. All the squirrels in the world were probably throwing a party.
That guy sucked.
But if you were severely disappointed with this move, then you didn't have to worry, because just 2 episodes later in Christmas Guy, the entire thing was undone. So you might be wondering what the point of all that was. Brother, I'm still wondering, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but the only thing I can land on is that it was a ratings thing. They really needed people to tune in, and promising a death was the best way to do it. The Simpsons kinda did the same thing back in the day. Turns out there are still some things Family Guy had yet to take from them.
You find the man who did this.
Ma'am,
You
what's
bring
your
him to
relationship
justice.
to Brian?
You make sure this
Are you sure
angel
you're at the
child
right
didn't die for nothing.
And you can kinda tell this is all done for the ratings, because the move hardly has any real impact on the season or the characters. It led with an admittedly very touching moment of grief and loss, and then it gets undercut by the family getting a new dog in that same episode. You've caught too many strays, Vinny. You just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
You want another beer?
No. I'd love one.
The death of Brian could have been used in a more character-rich way, something that actually affected the characters before more or less returning to the status quo. They kinda already did this with Season 8's Dog Gone, but only briefly. There were definitely more opportunities to show how much Brian mattered to the other characters. And, you know, to the show. Not gonna lie, his absence didn't really change much about the character dynamics. Are we sure he needed to be brought back?
We should check in.
And with Vinny, they really only used him to build a relationship with Stewie, and honestly, it doesn't go anywhere too interesting. Their dynamic didn't really mesh as well as Stewie and Brian's did, and he only has a few seconds of screen time with the other characters. Certainly there was much more that could have been done with this new character besides just a minor role in 2 episodes. It's anti-Italian discrimination.
Hey, everybody, we got a funny sandwich here. You.
And yeah, Brian comes back almost instantly, and the whole thing is quickly forgotten. They really couldn't have stretched this across the whole season, maybe making an overarching narrative that gets built on with each episode? Nah, too much work. Hope the ratings grab ended up being worth it, because this hesitance to commit to an idea and get all it's worth out of it seemed to really create some distrust with the writer's room.
All right, game on. Stu S.A. Stu S.A.
And that isn't the only character Family Guy's brought back from the dead, as they would also undo the death of one of the show's most notorious villains, James Woods. Woods was one of the many characters killed off in Season 9's And Then There Were Fewer, a move that Seth MacFarlane said himself was canon. And yet, 1 season later in Tom Tucker, The Man in His Dream, James Woods is brought back to life for some reason.
Hey, Knucklebutts.
James Woods.
But I don't understand it.
Look, we know the show has very little regard for continuity and canon. You can never say never in any form of media. Heck, even Uncle Ben came back at one point for a little bit. But bringing Woods back kinda removes some of the gravity and weight from what's considered one of the greatest Family Guy episodes.
And in accordance with Hollywood law, her life force was infused into me, bringing me back from the dead.
Next to Diane, Woods' death in And Then There Were Fewer had to be one of the most shocking. Woods had been a recurring villain who would pop up every now and then for years, and killing him off was definitely seen as a bold move. Not so bold now that we've learned people can just be brought back whenever. I still hold a firm belief that Diane is still alive and out there somewhere in the world, just waiting for the right time to come back and get revenge. Now that's a return with some purpose.
I need a drugs guy, a girls guy, a fitness guy, a guy with a boat who can dump stuff way out there kind of guy.
So there must be a pretty good reason for bringing James Woods back, right? Sure, he was a mostly beloved character, but his real-world stocks seemed to be on a downturn as he talked more and more about right-leaning politics. Well, like Brian, we think his return was purely just to surprise people and nothing more. I didn't really think people cared all that much when he died, to be honest. Didn't see people getting tattoos of James Woods after he died.
What is this a picture of? Is that the bottom of a white pumpkin?
Is she hot or not?
But Woods doesn't really do anything of note in this episode, or after that, really. He kinda just becomes relegated to small appearances here and there without actually having any major impact on the plot, whether it be hosting a behind-the-scenes look at the show in Inside Family Guy or talking to himself in The Simpsons Guy. You could have had a guy puppeting around his body with strings and it would have still probably had the same overall impact.
You lived in Springfield? Yeah, I worked at the Quickie Mart, researching a role. These guys are gonna lose.
In the long run, bringing James Woods back was far from being a net positive. The move just felt like it was entirely pointless, a cheap shock for one episode that didn't lead to anything worthwhile down the line. It made viewers distrust the show's promises, and it undercut the warranted shock of the murder mystery episode. Just to show how pointless this all was, James Woods High School even had its name changed eventually. Having Woods die off was definitely for the best in hindsight, but we'd argue it was a good move even in foresight too.
James Woods is an embarrassment to Quahog. He's a political troll and a maniac on Twitter. And
to kind of piggyback off of that last decision, Family Guy really doesn't care too much about its own continuity, does it? We get it, being on the air for 25 years makes it tough to remember everything. Heck, we've been doing this for like 2 years and I can't even remember my own lore half the time. but it's hard to discern sometimes whether or not certain things that have happened can really be considered canon or not.
Okay, first of all, Bonnie, you've been pregnant for like 6 years, all right? Either have the baby or don't.
And look, Family Guy is a cartoon. A cartoon filled with giant talking chickens, time-traveling babies, and the Grim Reaper. It's not exactly the show that really needs to be beholden to some kind of concrete continuity. If it's funny, who cares if it makes sense in the show's timeline? That's why we've seen Peter's origins like a dozen times already. But not really having anything concrete to grasp onto can sometimes lessen the emotions and feelings we have for these characters.
That doesn't make any sense. You know what, Stewie? If you don't like it, go on the internet and complain.
Look at Brian's origins, for example. Originally, he was shown to be a fairly grown dog who was saved from living on the streets by Peter. This was a major element of his and Brian's relationship that not only defined their history together, but also led to an actual emotional connection. Without it, episodes like New Kidney in Town wouldn't have hit nearly as hard. There's not a dry eye in my household whenever that episode comes on. Granted, my house is underwater, so that sounds a little bit redundant.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. I'd probably be dead anyway, lying under some freeway overpass.
But now Brian's origins of the Griffin family have grown a lot more muddled. Now they're saying that they've had Brian since he was a puppy, which is cute and all, but far less impactful than Peter taking an older dog off the streets. They just wanted more excuses to show puppy Brian, I bet. I see right through you, Family Guy. You know there's a lot more cuteness that's been left on the table, and you're gonna devour whatever you got.
When they put me in the tub, I figured it was just to rub my tummy. What a fool I was.
And this isn't the only source of confusion in the show either. Meg's been trying to go to college many times, yet she's still being portrayed as a high school student. The rules of who can understand Stewie are constantly rewritten and altered. It's this lack of consistency that hinders the show from ever really having moments of prominent development. They can say one thing today and say a different thing tomorrow.
She's only gonna get the gist of what you're saying.
Really? Isn't she one of those people outside the family who can understand me?
Obviously, it's hard to expect a lot of consistency from a show like this, but there's gotta be some effort. You don't need to have an episode where Peter's excited to meet Tom Brady for the first time after there was already an episode where he met Tom Brady. Check the Family Guy wiki for crying out loud. If so few things seem to stick, why should anyone care about what happens, especially when the show tries to have its big emotional moments? Having this through line will show people there's at least some structure to the show. It's holding on by the thinnest of threads, but at least it's there.
Wasn't your kid an actor, you jagoff?
Didn't your father hate your guts and die?
And a comment we've actually seen a few times on this channel actually takes issue with the rivalry between Brian and Quagmire. Now, we've covered this feud extensively. We even have a whole video about it that you can check out after this one. Or you can watch it at the same time you're watching this one. This was always meant to be the ideal Sweaty Clam viewing experience. But we've seen quite a few people point out their dislike for the rivalry, so let's look at why.
Out of me way! They're after me Lucky Charms! I paid them $10 to say it.
Firstly, it kinda just came out of nowhere. Quagmire and Brian were seen to have hung out a bunch of times in the past and actually seemed to enjoy each other's company to an extent. Then again, this was an entirely different Brian back in the day. If anything, Brian should have started hating Quagmire for how much of a gross creep he was. But maybe they were both just putting on their bravest faces for Peter, the glue holding the friend group together, not wanting to screw anything up.
Quagmire's cross-country tour. Isn't there an O in country?
Nope.
But it does seem like the feud was built over time, mostly on Quagmire's end. I guess as Brian started to transition out of his identity as the responsible and wise member of the friend group, Quagmire's opinion of him really started to sour. I can't say I blame him. There are rumors about Meg being replaced with a clone, but honestly, the more believable conspiracy theory is that Brian was replaced with a much dumber dog. But the issue here is that we never really got to see that progression from Quagmire with his liking of Brian slowly eroding. Peter just kinda tells Brian that Quagmire hates him, and that was that.
Quagmire hates me?
Hates you.
I don't get it. Why wouldn't Quagmire like me?
And a lot of this rivalry, at least from what we can tell, has been kinda one-sided. Even in the thick of the rivalry, Brian has shown that he doesn't outright hate Quagmire and only responds aggressively or snidely when provoked by Quagmire. But Quagmire's the kind of guy who would swerve his car into Brian if he saw him walking on the street. And we'd be lying if we said there wasn't good reason for Quagmire to actually dislike Brian. That rant of his from Jerome is the New Black is still pretty spot on, but it also represents a huge sign of hypocrisy on Quagmire's end.
You failed college twice, which isn't nearly as bad as your failure as a father. How's that son of yours you never see?
As we've talked about before, Quagmire has been guilty of doing a lot of the things he accuses Brian of, like abandoning his kids or treating women poorly. In fact, Quagmire has probably done a lot worse things than Brian. I know only one of them has had a gerbil and a tube inside them, and even if you were born yesterday, you could still tell who I'm talking about. And this is a bit of an issue with their rivalry. It didn't actually lead to any sense of growth or self-reflection.
I'll see you, Brian. Thanks for the steak.
Quagmire complaining about Brian for things he's done himself would have been a great jumping off point to get more introspective with both their characters. They're more the same than they are different, so why not make that more of an apparent storyline beat instead of them just needlessly hating each other? Kinda just makes us dislike Quagmire more if you can even believe that was possible. We could excuse the crimes and the creepiness, but we draw the line at the hypocrisy.
Giraffity! Yeah, see, that's not mine.
It almost kind of feels like the show wanted to ease Brian out of being considered one of the guys, more or less turning him into Stewie's sidekick. Don't get us wrong, those two have one of the best dynamics in the show, but it also kind of hurts the relationship between Brian and Peter as well. It feels like they hardly interact anymore, and their super strong bond has been mostly ignored by the show. And we've pretty much got Quagmire to blame for it. All those bad things he's done are one thing, but this? Now he's gone too far.
I knew I couldn't trust you, you filthy mongrel!
Guys, he didn't do it, I swear!
At the end of the day, Brian and Quagmire are a solid pairing that's more than capable of carrying episodes, but we have to wonder if maybe the two of them would have gotten more out of a rivalry with someone who was more of a contrast to them. Then again, there is something rather genius by having these two more or less feud over who's the biggest douche at the douche convention. Hating each other is practically like hating their own reflection, and while there's a lot that can be utilized with that idea, the show just hasn't used it to its fullest potential.
Not a cat.
And that's our list. Are there any decisions the show has made in the past that you think were a big mistake? Let us know down in the comments, and if you liked what you saw here and want to see more, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more Family Guy videos.